The first time I remember meeting David and Megan Messman was at a Start Here class a number of years ago. Start Here is kind of the introduction to our church. But I remember seeing them partly because they're so tall. And as the class progressed, I just kind of kept an eye on them because I sensed that they weren't maybe quite as experienced with the Bible. They weren't quite as experienced with just kind of how church worked, and it was clear that they hadn't been around that. I just kind of gave a special sort of attention to them because I wanted them to feel comfortable there.
I'm David Messman, and I'm married to Megan Messman.
I'm Megan Messman. I'm married to David. We have a daughter, Claire, who just turned 1. We attend Redemption Gateway, and we've been attending there for about 5 years.
Months before David and Megan got married, they were engaged, and he had grown up going to church, and I think he'd been fairly involved as a kid and as a teenager.
I was raised in a Christian home. I'm not saying that it was a perfect life or that we had everything granted to us, but I just know that my parents were always there with the Christian values to help support us, and that was something that was instilled in me.
But as he got a little bit older and as he got into college and that sort of thing, very kind of common story, he walked away from the faith.
I allowed sin in my life and kind of lost my faith.
He and Megan met, and she hadn't grown up really around church much.
I grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area. I was baptized as a child, as a baby. And then I didn't have any exposure to faith until I was about 10 years old. I had an urge or something in me that I wanted to go to the church down the street with our neighbor. I went with them for probably about 1.5 years, 2 years. I remember going to Sunday school. I remember doing different arts and crafts projects. I don't know why I stopped going, but I did. That was really the only exposure I had to faith until I met my husband.
Well, pretty early on, David and Megan shared with me their story about how he had sprung on her, soon before their wedding, that they were going to be Christians. And I just found that incredibly funny and interesting.
There's always that thing that comes out during the engagement, before a wedding, that stops the wedding. At some point in time, I'm going to have to say it. And I was like, well, I'm just going to bite the bullet and do it. And I said, hey, honey, I just want you to know that one of the things that I want is a couple Bible verses in our wedding vows, or just in the wedding itself.
He said, well, I want some Bible verses read at the ceremony. And I looked at him like, what? Bible verses? And I said, why? And he said,
well, we're going to raise our family and we're going to raise our kids as Christians. And this was news to Megan.
What?
And just so you know that when we do have children, I want to take our kids to church on Sundays. And if you don't want to go, you're more than welcome to stay at home, and we can go by ourselves, and we'll come back and we'll do our thing on Sundays, but we'll be going to church.
So that was how the conversation went, and it was kind of an argument at that point.
Her reaction was just more, I don't understand. I don't know why you want this. Why are you asking this now?
And then we kind of left it, and I think I needed to kind of sit on it.
Even though David had been a very kind and respectful guy, it wasn't like faith was something he wore on his sleeve. It wasn't something that they talked a great deal about. And so this was a funny thing for him to kind of spring on her just months before they got married.
I guess I didn't realize what was going to take place afterwards. I just wanted to have a couple Bible verses and go to church on Sundays.
After the conversation, I sat down with one of my friends and we started reading through the Bible to find these passages. And as we were reading through, I said, maybe we should go to church.
And then next thing you know, it led to, well, let's figure this out. Let's go to church.
I found the church, and then he said, let's go. I remember I got dressed very conservatively in all black, and he asked if we were going to a funeral. It's like, I don't know. I didn't know what to wear. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how laid back it was going to be, how serious it was going to be. It was a whole new experience for me.
We started attending Redemption, I want to say probably about 4 to 5 months prior to our wedding. And she and I had really started saying, okay, well, if we're going to do these Bible verses, if we're going to read these or we're going to have some verses read, I want to know what religion is. I want to know what Christianity is. And that's when she just delved in off into the deep end and said, I'm going for this.
As I was getting to know David and Megan, she was especially all in. I mean, she was coming to everything. She would sign up for everything. She had all these questions. And I think they were genuine questions, but I think there was also a sense of like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this.
Next thing you know, we were in a Start Here class. From the Start Here class, it was
RC group, and then a weekend with the story of God, and then fundamentals of the faith, and then Christianity 101 class. It was, church on Sunday, of course, and then me volunteering.
And I realized what I was signing up for.
He even at times was sort of pumping the brakes and thinking, when I said I wanted to be Christian, I'm not sure I wanted to be this Christian.
I think a lot of times he was biting his tongue for going, I want to raise our kids Christian.
It was just sort of fun to see where they were in that process. And so as I got to know David, it was clear that he'd grown up around church. So he thought of himself as a Christian, but he also didn't really know a great deal and was in a sense sort of rediscovering his own faith. And I think Megan was really trying to make sense of what did it all mean and what did it mean for her.
We heard about the Start Here class, and we signed up for that, and we took the class with Luke. It felt like no one else was where I was. I felt like I was in a room of people who were Christians that maybe had just started coming to Redemption Gateway and wanted to get involved, be in an RC, things like that. Not someone who had never been to church, was going to start here because it was literally me starting there. So I raised my hand and asked Luke, where should I start if I've never read the Bible before?
I remember her when she asked me, where should I start reading the Bible? And I told her, well, read the Gospel of Mark. It's straightforward and it's just great for Americans to read to get started in Jesus because it's action-packed.
So I went home and I pulled out that Bible off of the dusty bookshelf and I found Mark. It took me a little while to find it, but I found it. And I started reading through it and I started taking notes on it. Felt like paraphrasing what was going on and how it was coming across to me was the best way that I was learning.
Well, 2 days later, she called or texted me and said, okay, I'm done with Mark. And I remember thinking, most Christians I know just read a chapter a day and it takes like a lifetime to ever get through the Bible. She just finished it and said, okay, now what?
And then I read Matthew, Luke, and John and got a really good basis for Jesus and who he was and what his story was. Every weekend or every week, it seemed like there was a new class we were taking and he just rolled with the punches and knew what it was doing for me. I didn't know at the time what it was doing for me. I really felt like Christianity in the beginning for me was something I wanted to learn about, something I almost thought of it like a big class. Like if I can learn as much as possible, then eventually I'll just be able to say, I didn't at that point think to say I'm a Christian, but maybe to say, okay, at least I know what it is. I know most of the points about it. And I felt like there was this point where I was gonna hit and be like, oh, aced it.
There were a number of times over the next few years where I think they've become Christians. I think they're walking with the Lord. And I think maybe they should get baptized. And so every time we would do a baptism service, because we do them every few months, I would kind of ask, hey, do you think now's the time? Do you think now's the time? And especially for Megan, there was kind of a hesitation, I think, that did she really know enough? And was she really certain? I think for David, it was a little bit more like, would this be embarrassing to admit that maybe I need to get baptized? Because after all, I thought I'd grown up in the faith. But for whatever reason, they just didn't feel like they were ready. And so at some point, we started a new program called Fundamentals of the Faith, which was similar to Christianity 101, only it was a little bit longer and it was more of a mentoring type relationship. And so they began that with Rick Fisher. And one of the lessons along that way talks about how if you're a follower of Christ, if you're really a Christian, you need to get baptized. It doesn't save you, but it is a sign that you have a relationship with God and a way of publicly testifying to that fact.
I was baptized as a child, and so was she, but I didn't realize what baptism truly meant.
And I always felt like there was more I needed to do to become a Christian, more I needed to learn, more classes, of course, to take. And there was some point where, with knowledge, I would have enough of it that I could say, okay, I'm a Christian. It wasn't really a, do I actually believe, but do I know enough to be a Christian? And we were like, do we believe? And I was like, yeah, I think so.
I remember they got in touch with me and said, hey, we want to get baptized. And I remember thinking, yes, that's awesome. What was such a joy in the process as a pastor of watching David and Megan be baptized was here were all these people who had all these fingerprints in the story. And I played one role, Jay and Tiffany Power played another role, and the people in the RC played another role, and Rick and Ann Fisher played a role, and the folks who led the Story of God weekend played a role. It just was this team reality of someone coming to faith in a community.
I don't have to do anything to earn Jesus' love and his grace. I don't need to take all of these classes. I don't need to do all of this to be a Christian and for him to love me.
I need your help with something.
And that will be?
Well, I was making something special for you in the oven.
What the hell is that?
Well, what is it?
It's a bun.
It's a bun.
Where was it?
Yeah. Where was the bun?
Yeah. Where did you just take it from?
The bun
Where was it?
in the oven.
It was in the oven.
It was really fun when I heard that David and Megan were pregnant. We'd been in RC with them for a number of years. It was just so exciting. This thing that David had sprung on Megan of we're going to raise our family as Christians was now happening. That just was really special. So Claire was dedicated this past November.
I invited a lot of people. I invited some of my high school students, I invited some of my college students, I invited all of our family and our friends, and a few days prior I had reached out to Morgan and just said, hey, you know, we're dedicating Claire. I know you've been to the church a few times, but how about you come back and, you know, come hang out.
Morgan Westbrook, take one.
My name is Morgan Westbrook. I go to Redemption Gateway.
I met Morgan when she was in high school as one of David's students.
I met Dave when I was a sophomore in high school. He was the athletic trainer at the high school I attended, Campo Verde, and I had my own sports injury, so I started going to him for rehabilitation when I was swimming. I found out he was the sports medicine teacher at our school, so then my junior and my senior year, I took the classes Sports Medicine 1 and 2. I was my own person, didn't have many friends, just wanted to do sports medicine, and that was about it. Aside from Dave being a teacher, he was also a mentor to me. I mean, I would go to him for silly stuff in high school, and you know, he'd always lead everybody down the right path. My dad was raised Catholic and my mom was raised Lutheran, so they never made me or my sisters choose a faith. And I never really thought about, you know, going or attending. My family didn't growing up. We never really had a ritual or like a Sunday ritual where we would go to church, come home. When I was 15, I had a girlfriend in high school who introduced me to church. And then throughout high school, I never continued. I sort of retreated and spent my time doing other things. After graduating high school, I went to trade school to become a phlebotomist. I didn't go to college. My senior year was really rough. So I got my certificate and then took the state test, became registered, and then I started drawing blood, and then shortly after that was when I met my son's dad. We were together for a very short amount of time before we got married and moved to San Diego, moved back to California a couple times in a couple years. And after that ended, I came home. My son's name is Oliver. He is 4 years old, and he is the light of my life. I feel like I fell apart after I gave birth to him. For the first 3 years, I was struggling to figure out my purpose. You know, what I went through with his dad and just being young and trying to find ourselves and figure out parenting at 19. We were all over the place, especially myself. And I felt like I had no sense of direction. I think that's what reconnected me to Dave and his wife, Megan. I think we were placed back in each other's lives ultimately for a reason.
We invited Morgan to Claire's dedication, and little did we know until later on what a huge effect seeing Claire dedicated had on her.
People around this church have molded and shaped me, and my husband and I were baptized here, and it just brings me great joy to dedicate Claire today.
Seeing Dave and Megan dedicate Claire really opened my eyes to what's more important. Having my own child and knowing that I have to lead and set an example.
It wasn't until months later that she had approached me, and I thought for some reason that there was something major that happened, and she was calling me, texting me, said, hey, can I just stop by? I need to talk to you in person. I told her, I said, hey, I just can't. Can we just talk over the phone? And I thought the worst or something had happened. And so we got on the phone, and she got very serious, but said, I just want you to know how much that day meant to me, and that with Claire and seeing you guys with her, that I have just this feeling and this urge to be connected with God now.
I started attending church pretty much every Sunday, and then I was with Dave and with Megan one night. We were having a discussion, and I told him, I said, you know, last week at church, something was really tugging at me. I don't know. At the time, I still was like, what do I call it? I don't know what I'm feeling, but I knew it was God speaking to me.
So I first talked to Morgan on the phone. I had never met Morgan. I didn't know about Morgan. She had filled out a baptism application, which kind of allows people to tell their story.
Luke called me after I submitted my online form for baptism.
I was blown away. I thought it was amazing to hear how she basically told me that she had come to the dedication of Claire in November and had basically just never stopped coming, that just week after week after week. It was just clear that God was working. And similar to David and Megan, when I was talking to Morgan, I think I had a clearer sense. This girl's saved. Like, God has made her new.
He was very reassuring. He said, you sound ready. I think this is really exciting, and the fact that, you know, Dave and Megan, and that they're very influential in your life. I think having them involved, and, you know, I think that would be really cool.
One of the things that we really try to do is have people who are baptized, if they want to and can, be baptized by someone who is influential in them coming to faith. And so I really encouraged her, and she was excited to ask David to do it.
I want to be baptized because I have surrendered my heart to him.
It's been in God's forgiveness and Christ's undeniable love for me that I now feel free.
It was really powerful. It was really emotional. I don't feel like I'm treading in water anymore. I'm not trying to stay afloat. Now I just feel whole. I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
Man, it was cool. As cool as it was to watch Morgan be baptized, I was just as excited to watch David baptize her.
I realized what we unknowingly were doing and just raising our daughter that would have an impact on somebody else that just with a simple text said, hey, will you show up and be there with us? That I was then able to be there with her and baptize her.
You know, it's interesting with Morgan, it's like we've had this effect on her and, you know, but I feel like we've just been being ourselves, and it almost seems like the Lord just has kind of like seeped out our pores without us even knowing. She was so young when she got pregnant and got married, and I feel like God, and through coming to church, she's started this new path and is really growing into a beautiful young lady right before our eyes.
What I love about this story is that it feels like why we started this church. We started the church to reach people who didn't have a church background or were disconnected from that background. And so David and Megan coming to faith felt just so much like this is why we do this. When I think about Claire and when I think about Oliver, I think about how their lives are going to be forever different because their mom and dad love Jesus. Because Morgan is raising Oliver to know him.
I think Oliver's life is much better because God has really put this calmness in me. I just finally feel steady. Now that I've found my purpose and I've established my relationship with God, he's gonna see that and he's gonna learn and he's gonna understand that my strength comes from him.